Other things to note are the names of the variables, right? We call these variables by different names. We call them string, number of cookies, my name, and am I hungry? And if you've done any algebra, you know what variables are. Variables are x, y, and z. Remember, don't talk like an American. Z, not z. X, y, and z in your mathematics. But over here, we use more descriptive names like string and number of cookies and my name and am I hungry. Actually, string is not a very descriptive variable name because string just means text. We'll get to that in a moment. Notice that when I want a variable name with multiple words, I type it out like this. Lowercase n at the beginning, capital O, capital C, right? My name, lowercase m, capital N, lowercase a, capital I, capital H, okay? You cannot actually have any spaces inside a name. So let's show you this real quick. If I do number of cookies, it's going to be an error. And what is the error? The error says, found an unexpected second identifier in variable declaration. Is there an accidental break? And that actually is the error. But what it really means is, no spaces in variable names. You can try tapping on the fix button, but just be aware that sometimes Swift doesn't quite suggest the right solution to you. Okay, so in this case, it is the right solution. If you can understand this slightly complex sounding error message, it actually is the right solution. So press fix and it will do it one time and realize that, oh, wait a minute, there's still another space. So you can do it again, right? Just press fix and there we go. Nothing has gone wrong now. Okay. How else can you name variables? Well, you can't actually name variables with numbers at the beginning. So you can't do something like this. So var 100 bananas equals to banana. All right. So this is an error. And the error message for this is going to be a little bit more cryptic. If I tap on this, it's going to say B is not a valid digit in integer literal. So as you can see, all these error messages can be a little bit cryptic, right? They're all designed by programmers. They kind of need to cover for various scenarios, and it's not really something that is going to immediately make sense when you first read them, right? But no worries. If you ever find an error message that you're not sure about, you can just select it and go search for it on the internet, and there's a good chance that someone has encountered it and can explain it better to you. You can, however, start your variable names with emoji. So let's do that. Let's tap on my emoji button over here. Show emoji, and let's choose banana. Okay, so let's remove this. And this is perfectly valid, but you shouldn't do it because it's ridiculous. So I'm going to delete this line. All right, so that's great. Let's move on to the next bit. If you'll notice, all these variables are colored slightly differently, right? This is red in color on my iPad. This is blue and this is purple. It might look different for you if you're in dark mode, but all these are colored differently. And what this means is that these are actually the same type of variable. These two are strings. Strings are essentially text. They come in double quotes, and you saw them in the previous videos when we were using SwiftUI text views. Okay, so these are strings. I'm going to type a comment over here and say string, right? / string. This thing over here is a number, and there are two types of numbers that we will be looking at. One is whole numbers, and one is decimal numbers. So this is called an int, right? Short for integer, whole numbers. Over here, this is a string again, and this thing is a bool, right? A bool stands for Boolean, and it's either true or false. Now, I said that there were two types of numbers. There's one more type, which is those with decimal points. So var, what's something that requires a decimal point? Let's say percent of pies equals to 0.5, right? I'm not sure what percent of pies actually means, but it's 0.5. This is actually a completely different numerical type in Swift from the int over here. And we will see that they have very subtle differences as we go along. What if I wanted to create number of cookies as a double, right? So, you could eat half a cookie, although I don't see why you would do that. But you could have 9.5 cookies left over after someone's done with them. So what you could do is you could try and set number of cookies to 9.5. Let's see what happens. if you pause for a bit, you don't even need to run your code. Swift knows that this is an error. And that's because number of cookies is an integer. It's an int type, and you're trying to make it into a double type. You're trying to treat it like a double type. So let's see what the error message is. What's this cryptic error? Cannot assign value of type double to type int. Okay, so what that means is these two types, an int and a double, are actually very, very different to Swift. You cannot take a whole number and just deduct half of it. So how do you fix it? Over here it says insert int bracket, insert bracket. Not sure what that means, but let's tap on it. Fix. And it says number of cookies equals to int 9.5. What? Let's run my code and see what that actually does. So you tap on this, run my code, and that's going to presumably run my code. I'm going to tap on this, and number of cookies is now 9. So what's going on? What happened is that we have this thing over here. It's called a cast. So, Harry Potter, like wizards, cast. What's happening is that you are taking this 9.5 and changing it from a double into an int. And this int is exactly what can fit into number of cookies, which is expecting an int. Okay? So think of variables as little boxes that can store things, but they're very particular boxes and can only store particular things. So you couldn't store a double inside an int, but if you change this double before you put it inside, that's perfectly fine. What happens when you change a double to an int? You just kind of ignore everything after the decimal point dot, and you change 9.5 into 9. What if you really, really want number of cookies to become 9.5? Well, you could redefine number of cookies as a double. Here's how you do it. You could do 10.0. Right? This is no longer an int. I'm going to change this to a double. And my code should run perfectly fine. Right? If I run my code, and if I look at my number of cookies, wait, that's not my number of cookies. Over here, my number of cookies is now 9.5. Very nice. There's another way. There is another way. You can actually go ahead and take away this 0.0 and do this thing called type annotations. So I'm going to type a colon after this and type in the word double. And what this means is that I'm going to be very specific when creating my variable to define it as a double when I create it. Okay, so we didn't use this before, right? We didn't use this type annotation before. This line doesn't have it. This line doesn't have it. This line doesn't have it. Swift has been very cleverly inferring the type based on the value that we tried to give to it. But sometimes we just want to force a type, in which case we just say, okay, colon double, right? So what this means is that this is 10, but Swift knows that it's supposed to be stored into a box that's supposed to contain a double. So it's going to be like, all right, I kind of know that I need to store 10.0 so that someone else can work with it as a double later on. So what's actually happening here for var my name behind the scenes is actually var my name colon string. Okay, but we are lazy and we don't type that out if we don't need to. But in this case, you might actually want to. All right, so that's our little introduction to variables and constants.